Okay, we're going to go and get started. Good morning to everyone. Welcome to our first meeting of the year, actually. Well, actually, I shouldn't say that. It's our second meeting of the year, our first virtual meeting of the year. When I looked at my phone this morning and saw where I live not far from downtown Los Angeles, that it was going to be 111 degrees this weekend, I decided I am wearing an Aloha shirt. And there was nothing else that I could do from there. I would like to, before we get fully started on some other things, I do have a couple of comments I wanted to make. You'll see that I'm chairing the meeting today. That's because our prior chair, Lucy Dunn, has moved on from the California Transportation Commission and from her role as chair of the road charge TAC. I'd like to thank Lucy personally for her role in the TAC. Obviously her much longer role on the CTC and in transportation in general. She won't be going away. She's just in different roles, and she'll be pushing and helping this and many other efforts into the future. With that, I would like to note that we do have a new chair for the road charge TAC, CTC Commissioner Joe Liu. And Mitch, I think you're going to introduce Joe to the group.
Yes, I'd be happy to. Joe Liu was appointed by Assembly Speaker Rendon to the California Transportation Commission in January. He has more than 29 years of experience fighting for environmental health and justice, and brings a wealth of knowledge and passion to his work on air quality, climate policy, technology, and science. He's previously served as governor's appointees to the South Coast Air Quality Management District, and held management positions with the California Environmental Rights Alliance and the California League of Conservation Voters Education Fund. I'd like to turn it over to Joe to make a few remarks, and then if I can, grab back the mic once Joe is done.
Sure. Thank you, Mitch. I appreciate it. And welcome, everyone. I was promised by Lucy Dunn that you would all behave yourself if I took that position as chair. So I hope you'll make good on that. I will, I guess, assume the mantle. Let Steve take care now. I'm still trying to figure out what road charge is all about. I went to the Excel spreadsheet and digging around yesterday to try to figure out how much money we talking about, right? And so I looked up how many miles Californians drive every year and how much we raise through the gas and diesel taxes, and it turns out that on average, I think, based on my calculations, it was $358 a year per vehicle on average. I was like, okay, that kind of makes sense, and it's revenue neutral. And I thought, well, that's what we're talking about. And I've been looking at all these complicated issues that you guys have been dealing with over the last several years. I have read your recommendations report. I've looked at what the CTC staff and Caltrans and CalSTA have been thinking about, what others have been looking at. And this seems like a very complicated issue with a lot of different ramifications, but I think we might be able to get it right. And I look forward to working with you to try to do so. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Joe. Mitch, you said you wanted to say something else?
Yeah, I just real quick want to let the committee members know that Garth Hopkins, who has been leading the commission efforts for road charge for the last couple of years, will be retiring this month after more than 30 years with the state and the last 5 with the commission. He has several times served as the commission's acting chief deputy director. He will be greatly missed, not just for his work on road charge, but for his work with the CTC as a whole. So I just want to thank him for his efforts and wish him well.
And if you don't mind, Mr. Chair, I just have to take a personal privilege and just say that Garth Hopkins and I went to high school together here in San Diego, and I can't even think of retiring because I'm just too hyper. So congratulations to Garth and all his good service to the state of California. And being such a tech geek, he's fit in perfectly with this work, and he will be greatly missed. So thank you for letting me make that comment.
That's my claim
Anything?
to fame, Jim, going to school with you, so my life's complete. This is Garth.
Well,
Hey,
we'll
thanks
miss
for
you, Garth. You've been great.
Thanks for jumping in, Garth, and thanks for those comments, Jim, as well. Appreciate that. And Joe, welcome again to the group. We are a very tight group, close group, and I think as we go through this meeting and future meetings, you'll get a sense of where we've been, where we are, and hopefully where we're going. I think it's a very open group with a lot of expertise across a lot of different areas. And I think that you'll enjoy working with the whole group. And certainly, I know AAA has enjoyed working with your group over the years in support of clean air objectives. So we really appreciate that as well. Okay, our last TAC meeting, as I just remembered a few minutes ago, was back in February in San Francisco, if you recall. And I know every one of these virtual meetings starts off with somebody talking about the pandemic and the crazy world we're in. But what a different universe, a different lifetime ago that meeting in February in San Francisco. It was a beautiful, crisp day. I remember walking from my hotel to the meeting site, taking a picture of a glass building with the Salesforce Tower reflected in it. And then, the world ended a number of weeks later. So anyway, appreciate everybody for joining in on this. Couple of other things. Wanted to thank everybody for your flexibility for joining in this venue and through this technology. We'll work through whatever issues we need to work through to make sure that everybody has their voice, everyone can say what they want to say, and then we can proceed in the best way forward. As established by our founding chair, Jim Madaffer, who's still on the committee, when it comes to public comment, we are a very open group. We welcome people's comments. We have some spots in the agenda for it, but if you are a member of the public wanting to comment, feel free to make sure your voice is heard. Raise your hand, literally or figuratively. Let staff know. Use the chat feature as well, and we welcome that very much. And then before we continue on with the rest of the agenda, just a couple of words I wanted to share regarding sort of where we're at in this process and where we might be headed in the future. I think that when we convened originally a number of years ago, I think we had a lot of energy behind us. We did a great pilot project with a lot of good information from that, and then things began to change as SB1 was approved, and then obviously more recently with the pandemic and everything. So I think we're still trying to figure out our best path forward. We're going to be hearing today from Caltrans and from CTC and from CalSTA as well on what they've been doing, what their thoughts are on all these issues. But I think when we get to the committee member comment period, feel free to chime in with any thoughts you have. We don't want to waste people's time with unnecessary or unproductive meetings. At the same time, I have a great interest in continuing to move this issue forward. And I think that staying connected is one way to do that. And I think opportunities will come up. We need to figure out a long-term solution. And I think that this group is poised to help with that when the opportunity is available to us. So with that, why don't we move on to agenda item number 2, which is the roll call. And Doug, can you call the roll for us? Is Doug or somebody else available to do that?
Stand by.
Member Bartlett?
Here.
Senator Bell? Member Benzel? Assembly Member Chu? Vice Chair Finnegan?
Present, if I can hit the unmute button fast enough.
Thank you. Member K?
Here.
He's young. How old is he?
I'm sorry, are we having some technical issues, Hannah or Doug?
Yes, we are. Bear with us one moment.
Present.
Member Mark Antonio. Member O'Connor.
Present.
Member Ornelas.
Here.
Member Poitras.
Yes.
Member Sauer.
Good morning, everyone here.
Member Tien.
Hey, Lee, I think you're on mute.
He was muted.
Okay. Present.
Thank you. Member Wax.
I'm here.
Chairman Liu.
Here.
Mr. Vice Chair, we have a quorum.
Excellent. Thank you all very much. And I'm sure we'll have little technical issues that'll pop up periodically. And I think we've all become used to those, unfortunately. I noticed that the CTC staff that is working in the office has masks on. And so I want to thank you for that. I really appreciate that. That's a great lead and guidance. I am in the office, as you can see behind me. I don't have my mask. I'm distanced from other people. We have some pretty strict protocols here, but anyway, I appreciate you doing that. Next item we have is approval of the minutes. So the minutes from our February 2020 meeting in San Francisco are in the packet that you have before you. And Hannah, maybe before we approve those, I wonder if you can go over any of the action items that we had from those, and then I'll ask for a motion and a second to approve the minutes.
Sure, no problem. And actually, before I do that, do you mind if I have Michael say a few things just about the webinar in general, so that if any member of the public would like to comment during the meeting, they know how to do that?
Thank you very much. I forgot that. Appreciate you bringing that up. Go ahead, Michael.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Michael Joseph. I'm program analyst for the Road Charge TAC. I have a few words about the meeting procedures. The meeting will be conducted entirely online. The agenda is located under the Handouts tab and can be downloaded and saved during the webinar. It can also be found on the Commission website. If you're experiencing any technical issues with the webinar system, please just contact the staff here through the Questions tab on the right, or through the CTC email address, ctc@catc.ca.gov. Gov. Should TAC members have any questions or comments during the meeting, please let the staff know through the comment tab or via text to Mitch or Hannah or me. Be sure to turn on your camera when you comment. You can also send inquiries and comments via the questions tab, and these can be read to presenters in the audience on your behalf. In addition, make sure the view everyone settings is on your menu bar at the top, so everybody can see each other. Please mute your microphone except when you intend to speak to minimize the outside noise and feedback. Because this person is not an in-person meeting, every vote will need to be a roll call vote for all action items. For participants joining us through the GoToWebinar system, you can find that the panel for all the controls on the right-hand side of your screen. There are two options for participants to provide comments on agenda items using the Questions tab. You can type in the agenda item number you are commenting on and your comment. Commission staff will read your comment on your behalf. Alternately, you may click the hand icon to indicate you wish to raise your hand and make a comment. You'll then be unmuted and called upon to make your comment. Please be sure to state your name and affiliation prior to voicing your remarks. And that is all. Thank you.
Hey, thank you very much, Michael, for that. And I apologize for skipping that over. And Hannah, do you want to update us on any of the action items from the minutes before we get a motion and a second to approve them?
Sure. So a few of the main action items that we followed up on since the last time we met. TAC members provided input on ideas for surface transportation system funding alternatives grant applications. That was a grant that Caltrans applied to. And when they were working on that ideas for what to submit for their grant, some of the members had provided some input on that. They ended up submitting a grant to study public-private roads and how that might work in road charge. Professor Wax participated in a Caltrans research workshop in April. I sent around a presentation by Professor Wax that he had given at an MBUFA meeting. And I also sent around links to some works by Alan Jen and Asha Weinstein Agrawal related to road charge. Milestone Solutions, the consulting firm that we were working with, studied the Privacy Act for us, and I'm still reviewing that right now, but they did give me a report on that, and we were going to follow up with the TAC on that once we've had a chance to look at it. And then in follow-up to the revenues presentation, we got information from Caltrans that local revenues make up a little over half of all transportation revenues. And several members of the TAC met with Lauren Prahota from Caltrans to discuss disadvantaged communities further. The TAC members were also invited to participate in an online forum where perceptions of low-income individuals were kind of being studied as part of a Caltrans study, perceptions about road charge. And members of the TAC were also invited to participate in some disadvantaged community focus groups that were held around the state. So that concludes the action items from the February 2020 meeting.
Okay, great, Hannah. Thank you very much. And then with that, if I could ask for a motion to approve the minutes.
Motion, Medapper.
Second
Okay,
by Pam O'Connor.
Jim, I hear a second from Pam. I know it was stated that we had to do all action items by a roll call vote, but if I ask if there are any objections, does that work, or do we have to go through the roll call?
We have to go through the roll call.
There you go. So let's do the roll call on the minutes.
Lisa Bartlett,
Yes.
Senator Bell, Terry Benzel, Assemblymember Chu, Vice Chair Finnegan.
Yes.
Lauren Kay,
Yes.
Jim Medaffer,
Yes.
Richard Mark Antonio, Pam O'Connor,
Yes.
Susan Ornelas,
Yes.
Robert Poitras,
Yes.
Eric Sauer,
Yes.
Lee Tien,
Yes.
Martin Wax,
Yes.
Chair Liu.
Abstain.
Mr. Vice Chair, the motion is approved.
All right, thank you very much. Essentially unanimous, wise choice, Joe, since you weren't there. Appreciate that. Okay, our next item on the agenda is for member reports. So this is an opportunity for the committee members to provide some information on anything they've been doing related to the topic, maybe things they've heard, or maybe they've spoken at things, even virtually, or any other comments or actions you'd like to share with the group. So with that, I'm not sure the best order to do this. Maybe we can just go ahead and do it in roll call order, if you don't mind, knowing who's not in the meeting, to maybe skip over and just make sure that everybody has an opportunity to comment. And if that's the case, if someone from the CTC could lead us through the list, again, you can skip over the people we know aren't here.
Happy to do so. Lisa Bartlett?
Okay, thank you, Chair Finnegan. So I just like to, reiterate that we're all looking at the dollars coming in from the pump for gas tax revenue at the state and federal level. and it's falling so far short. So the quicker we can plan and get a robust program in place, federal interoperability is going to be a really key thing. I know we're just looking at the transportation funding, both state and federal, and it's looking really sad at the moment. Somehow we get the feeling that in the state, in Sacramento, that there isn't a major focus, whether it's with the governor's administration or the legislature, to really move something forward with another robust, whether it's a pilot program or utilizing things at the federal level for federal interoperability. So we just need to continue to stay vocal, because we know that the dollars coming in are not going to meet the needs for building out our transportation infrastructure and maintaining the same for roads and highways in the future. So we just have to continue to be vocal. I know that at the state level, we've got a whole host of things we're tackling there, but we've got to be that vocal entity to really push our initiative forward and get a robust program in place for our state. Thank you.
Vice Chair Finnegan.
No additional comments at this point.
Lauren Kay.
Nothing, thank you.
Jim Madaffer.
No, nothing. I look forward to the discussion of the meeting today, however, and see where we go from there.
Pam O'Connor.
Nothing, nothing right now.
Susan Ornelas.
I just have a couple questions. I wanted to ask Joe, when he said that people are paying $358 per vehicle per year, I just wondered how many miles you were including in that.
It was, hold on, I've got it here, 344 billion miles per year.
Well, then I guess I need to know how many people or what,
Well, right, and
per vehicle, say. But anyway, that's just a thought. Maybe at some point.
And about $8.5 billion in gas and diesel tax revenue. That's just the state money. It's not the local money. So it's only part of the problem, but it's the one that we're responsible for at CTC. Anyway,
yeah,
that's how I did it. I don't know how accurate it is. I would leave it up to staff to correct me.
Hey, Joe. See, we're going to keep you on your toes, Joe. Here, so you got to come prepared, backed up, and everything else.
There you go.
Yeah, I could open the spreadsheet if I had to, but those were just the notes that I made.
Okay, well, that was just
yeah.
Then I did wonder, just with Lisa's comment, I was wondering if the whole COVID-19 and the way we're driving differently today than we were 5 months ago, or 7 months ago. If, could you correlate some of the drop in funding of SB1 to the fact we're driving less?
Yeah, I think the short answer is yes, and the bigger question is how long does that last? Driving went down dramatically, starting in March and into April and into May. I was working from home for a couple months. I've started back in the office. I've been back here now for about 3 months, and just here in Southern California, every day I saw a mounting increase in traffic. It's not as much as it was before, but clearly with less driving, there's less revenue as well. But how long that continues is to be determined, I think.
Okay, thank you.
Robert Poitras.
No member report at this time. Later on in the meeting, I think when it's more appropriate, I've got a few questions and comments, but nothing to report as far as activities.
Eric Sauer.
Nothing to report.
Lee Tien.
Nothing to report.
Professor Wax.
Nothing new to report. Thank you.
Chairman Liu.
No report on my end. Thank you.
Mr. Vice Chair, that's the group.
All right. Thank you guys so much for that. I appreciate that. And I know everyone's going to pipe in on some of the other items coming ahead. And I did want to give a quick look ahead for the rest of the meeting. I don't think we're going to need all of the time that we have allotted for this. Mainly, we're going to be hearing from Caltrans. We're going to be hearing from them about their study on disadvantaged communities. We're going to be hearing about their research plans going forward, and also on the draft California Transportation Plan as well. And we're also going to be hearing from CalSTA, and I believe that we have the Secretary of Transportation on to provide a few comments So with that, I would like to hand it over to David Kim. David, we've always appreciated the time you've given to this effort and appreciate your leadership. And the floor is yours, Secretary Kim.
Great. Thank you very much, Vice Chair Finnegan, and good morning to all members of the committee. Good to be with all of you today. I'm in my office in Sacramento, and like Steve, I've been coming into the office a few days a week. I think it sounds like you're full-time. I'm coming in a couple days a week and teleworking the rest of the time. I want to start by welcoming and congratulating the newest member of the Technical Advisory Committee, as well as the incoming chair, CTC Commissioner Joe Liu. As you heard, Joe has been on the commission for a pretty brief period of time, about 6 months, but I've been really impressed with him. He is someone who comes thoroughly prepared, as we've already seen this morning. He does his homework, and I know he's going to bring a lot of good perspectives and enthusiasm to the work of this committee. And as Vice Chair Finnegan referenced in his remarks, so much has changed since we last met in February. In fact, at the end of our last meeting on February 21st in San Francisco, several of us were taking the train back to Sacramento when we learned of the first COVID cases in California. And little did we know at that moment what was in store for all of us, that the virus would spread throughout the state, nation, and world, dominate our collective lives, and completely upend the economy in life as we know it. But at the same time, some things don't change, and road charge is one of them. The pandemic does not fundamentally alter our efforts on this important program, and the pandemic has shown us how reduced traffic volumes and GHG emissions can produce health benefits in terms of greatly improved air quality. Back in March and April, we saw freeway traffic down 40 to 60% in places like the Bay Area and LA Orange County. And if we assume telework is here to stay, and I think that's a safe bet, then the question of long-term revenue sources becomes critically important. And then you layer on top of that where VMT will be going in the future. And it's really anybody's guess, because at least in the short term, with transit ridership down as low as it is, and people relying on their own personal vehicle to get around, VMT may take a hit, but it may not. So it's really going to be hard to say. But I think the point I want to say is, as we look to the future of a road charge program, I think it's really important for all of us to keep equity foremost in our minds. If the program is properly designed such that the burden of maintaining state of good repair on our transportation system does not fall disproportionately on any one community, that is a good outcome, and it's something we should aim to do. Now, I think some of you know that I issued a statement back in June following the murder of George Floyd on racial equity, justice, and inclusion in transportation. In that statement, I said that CalSTA strongly condemns systemic racism and discrimination in all forms, including those historically entrenched in transportation. I also point out that transportation decisions of the past literally put up barriers, divided communities, and amplified racial inequalities, especially in our Black and brown neighborhoods. We go on to say that the principles of racial equity, inclusion, and diversity are foundational to achieving our vision of a cleaner, safer, more accessible, and more connected transportation future for California. We are going to be part of the solution, and going forward, CalSTA and all of our departments will promote policies and programs that reflect these principles. And I think it simply comes down to this: transportation systems are about people, and so we're going to do everything we can to ensure that systems are designed and delivered in a manner that will provide safe and equitable access to opportunity, especially for people of color and disadvantaged communities, to truly enhance quality of life. And so to that end, I look forward to hearing about the study conducted by the Foundation for California Community Colleges that has an equity component. Lauren Prohoda will brief the committee on the report, as well as the other ongoing work by the Caltrans road charge team. And I'm happy to hear that several TAC members have been providing input along the way. Also, as promised at the last meeting, Lauren will walk us through a list of unanswered questions in need of additional research. It covers a wide range of issues relating to the technology itself, as well as applications to various populations throughout the state, how the program should be administered, and so forth. The list is not exhaustive, but I think it should lead to some good discussion here today so that the road charge team at Caltrans can develop a research roadmap to get the answers that are needed and develop a program that works for all Californians. And I just want to reiterate that we're not looking to answer these questions today, but rather to get your input as it relates to developing problem statements for future research, as well as discuss any issues where you might see a need for additional research that's not addressed in today's presentation. And so with that, Vice Chair Finnegan, thank you for the time, and I look forward to today's discussion. Thanks.
Great. Thank you very much, Secretary Kim. I really appreciate that. I appreciate your comments on racism and the role of transportation. Clearly, the purpose of transportation should be to provide mobility, safe mobility for people, and opportunity for everyone. So I appreciate hearing that. I also appreciate your comments on the uncertainty of VMT and travel in the future. I think so many people pontificate about the new normal and what the new normal is going to be, and I don't think they have any idea what they're talking about. And I think we'll all figure that out as we go forward in the coming months and beyond. So appreciate that, and I think we all have to be flexible and nimble with that. So with that, before we let the Secretary go from this item, are there any comments or questions from the committee?
Yes, Steve, this is Rob Poitras, and I submitted a question there and just like to make a comment and ask the Secretary a couple of questions here. May not have an answer, but I think it's more about a concern. Anyway, good morning, Secretary.
Good morning.
And anyway, you know, it seems like, at least to me over the last year or two, it seems like the road charge effort has kind of been put on the back burner by the legislature and the administration. You know, we organized this effort back in 2014, and we're moving along, and then it seems like it's kind of lost steam. And it's interesting to me because we're getting closer to the point where we really need a road charge type of program. And it seems like the closer we get to it, the farther away we are, and the less emphasis that's put on this type of program. I'm a little bit puzzled by that. For instance, I know that there was a study that came out that stated that the you know, maybe the decline in gas tax revenues wouldn't be as much as we originally thought it might be. But, you know, it just seems like we're getting more fuel efficient cars, more zero emission cars, hybrid cars, things of that sort, that's just naturally going to reduce revenues coming in. You know, and I also know that the state is pushing for more, you know, as fast as they can for zero emission cars. So it seems like we're going the other direction than what we're moving forward in as far as the state goes. Another concern I have is that when we actually get to the point where we see a sharp decline in gas tax revenues for road repair, we're not going to be ready for it. And I think about the high-speed rail and what a disaster that's been. You know, we passed in 2008, 2009 funding for that particular project, and now it's you know, it's just like on life support right now. We've got legislators from Southern California wanting whatever money's left over, and people here in the Valley fighting for that. And so I don't want to see that kind of effort. I want to see us move forward with a robust effort so we're not scrambling at the last minute. And finally, the thing that you brought up, you talked about equity. And to me, this is one of the most equitable ways that we can pay for our roads. Here where I'm from disadvantaged California Central here in the San Joaquin Valley. And there's a lot of people here that can never think about affording a Tesla or a hybrid car of any sort. They're driving pickups and vehicles that get 15, 20, 25 miles per gallon. And the burden of paying for roads is disproportionately on their backs. So whenever you talk about providing equity for Black, for Brown, so on and so forth, to me, this is a program that we need to move forward with faster than slower in order to provide that equity. So just wanted to share those comments. It's, you know, I'm very passionate about coming up with a different program so that we don't, you know, get behind as far as road repair. I know in my county, even with the revenues we're bringing in right now, we're still 30% under what it takes to keep our roads level as far as the condition goes. So again, thank you for joining us today and for listening to my comments.
Okay, thanks, thanks, Robert. I know the Secretary will comment on that. A lot of issues, and thanks for your input on that. Secretary Kim, some thoughts?
Yes, thank you very much, Rob, for your perspectives. I do think we are making progress. And now, is that progress fast enough? I guess it depends on who you talk to and who you ask. I do think we are moving forward. There are still unanswered questions from a research standpoint. And as I mentioned back in February when we last gathered, we've got to get it right. We've got to do our due diligence. We've got to do our homework. And that's going to require a methodical and thorough approach and a thoughtful approach as well. I think we're doing that. We're learning a lot from other pilots and demo projects that are being done around the country. So as time goes on, more is becoming revealed to us, and we're learning a lot more. So I think we're getting there. And also, and I think you referenced this, when it comes to projections of future gas tax revenues, they're not as dire as they once were. We're not looking at a cliff tomorrow. We've got some time. And so I think the key is to make sure we continue moving forward, and I think we are. And I think you're going to hear that from Caltrans later today, and to keep moving, keep that ball going, and to continue to learn more, continue to do that research that's necessary, and continue to take that methodical approach. So I think we're moving in the right direction.
Thank you, Secretary Kim, and again, thanks, Rob, for those thoughts. Yeah, just real quick, and we'll go on to other people's comments. You know, I've been of two minds with this. I think ever since we started this effort, I think I and I think many of us knew that we were on a long path. This was going to take a while for multiple reasons. And then SB1 came in and changed the math a little bit, but we still need to be moving down the path. So, you know, I recognize that we need, you know, what Secretary Kim said, and we need to get it right. It's going to take time, but we need to keep moving forward productively. And so I appreciate your comments, Rob, very much. Other thoughts from committee? Oh my God, it's a silent group. I cannot believe it.
This is Jim. You know, I'm a recovering politician, so I can never not speak, I guess. But I just want to say to the Secretary, appreciate the comments. He and I have talked, and you know, I share exactly what Supervisor Poitras talked about. But also, because this is the best way to equalize, if you will. It is a totally fair thing. When we heard back in 2015, when we were on our road tour for the whole year, this committee, as you know, traveled around the state and took input. Some of the areas where we heard the most was in the Central Valley, in the northern parts of the state, the logging parts of the state, where people drive anywhere from, you know, 45 minutes to 2 hours to get to their job. And those are the folks typically that have the lower incomes, driving the cars that get the worst gas mileage, and they're paying the most to use the roads, and because of that. And we know that if we had a per mile fee, that would definitely equalize that to where they would actually be paying a more fair rate. And the folks that, like myself, that drive the electric cars, and the people that drive the Priuses and everything else would be paying more of their fair share. So we know it's there. I guess, Mr. Secretary, the only thing I would ask relative to the legislative angle is something that I've been pushing for the last couple of years, that there's no reason not to start ASAP. And that's when it comes to, once you and your department and the DMV and whomever else certify autonomous vehicles for use on the public right of way, that because of the data, the telemetry, and the connectivity of those vehicles and the technology, they should start paying by the mile right away. So I would love to get your comment on where that is legislatively. Is that something that the administration is still pushing, as the last administration was in agreement on. And then the other question would be, as we continue moving forward, and I'm sure we'll learn more today, what about the fleets within the state of California as probably the best way to do a test, because you control those fleets and you run those fleets, and that would again help learn beyond the 5,000 vehicle pilot we did. So autonomous vehicles, when are they going to start paying by the mile? And then what can we look at as far as fleets? Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jim. On the issue of autonomous vehicles and the potential of having a road charge program for AVs, I understand that there might be a legislative proposal somewhere, maybe next year. I don't know. I'd be interested in seeing that. The devil's always in the details. So I'd like to take a look at that if a bill were to be introduced. With respect to state fleets, that's something we talked about, I think, in our last meeting. We'll continue to look into that. It's not a simple matter of just snapping your fingers and getting a fleet, state fleets up and running from a charge standpoint. But we'll look at that and see what the options are and see if there's feasibility there.
Thank you, sir.
Great, thanks so much. And any other comment? I see Mitch raised a hand.
Yeah, I just want to jump in to talk about something relative to committee member Madaffer's question. Commission staff recently had a meeting with some of the members of the Silicon Valley Leadership Group to talk about autonomous vehicles and potentially starting there. As most of you know, autonomous vehicles already have to report mileage to DMV. If you look at there's a question of what would the rate be, but if you look at a variety of possibilities, it looks like across the industry, the total paid would be $100,000 or less. So I don't know that would be a significant impediment to the development and implementation of autonomous vehicles. But we're going to have more discussions with them. And I think the type of questions you've asked are some of the things that I think we can have some valuable discussions at future meetings. What should be our next steps and what are going to be the processes? How do we dip our toe in the water as a state?
Okay, thanks, Mitch. I appreciate that. And perhaps the threshold is they're out on the roads now in various testing scenarios, and maybe the threshold to cross is when they're really used and available for public use. So maybe that's the threshold as well. So appreciate that. Any other thoughts or questions or comments for Secretary Kim? Okay, I think that's it. So Secretary Kim, thank you again for your time. You're welcome to stay on for the whole meeting. We understand if you have to move off though, and do appreciate your support and look forward to continuing to work with you, on this and other issues as well.
Great, thank you, Vice Chair.
Okay, thanks. That brings us to agenda item number 7, which is probably the meat of this meeting. We're going to be hearing from Caltrans, Lauren Prahota, who is going to go over a number of items. I think she's going to start a little bit in reverse order from what's on the agenda. She's going to start with the California Transportation Plan first, and then touch on the disadvantaged community study and also the research plan and concepts going forward. So with that, Lauren, the floor is yours.
All right. Good morning, everyone. So glad to be with you virtually today. I think we have some really interesting things to share with you today. I'm going to start off by handing it over to my wonderful colleague, Marlon Flournoy, who's our Chief of the Division of Transportation Planning, and he is going to provide an update on some of the other work going on in Caltrans. The California Transportation Plan, which is the overarching state vision for transportation, and that's out on the street right now in draft form. So he is going to tell you a little bit more about that. So if we can hand it over to Marlon.
Okay, great. Can you hear me? Okay, great. Yes, my name is Marlon Flournoy. I'm the Chief of the Division of Transportation Planning here at Caltrans. And today I just wanted to provide just a brief update on our California Transportation Plan 2050. I'm happy to say that we just released the plan for our public review. So we're kicking off our 60-day review period, which will be concluding October the 22nd. You can find the plan and supporting documents at the website, which is ctp2050.com. And there's, in addition to the document and supporting documents for the plan, we also have webinars that we're going to be hosting over the next several weeks. And we'll have one webinar posted to the website, which is going to be September the 25th. And there will be a live Q&A for that. I just want to briefly just cover, just a couple of items related to the work that this committee is involved in. Just overarching, we do have a vision for California identified in the plan, and it's California safe, resilient, and universally accessible transportation system supports vibrant communities, advances racial and economic justice, and improves public and environmental health. And in that overarching vision, we do have 8 goals that we've identified in order to meet that vision, which includes safety, climate, equity, accessibility, quality of life and public health, economy, environment, and infrastructure. And then it's going to dig a little bit into the infrastructure aspect, because I think the road user charge is really related to that piece. Along those lines, for our infrastructure goal, it's basically to maintain a high quality, resilient transportation system. And one of the objectives includes securing a sustainable, dedicated, long-term funding for the transportation system. And in the plan, if you have an opportunity to review it, and we definitely want to encourage you to submit comments. But we have 14 recommendations that have been identified, which will allow us to achieve our legislative mandates. One of those mandates is demonstrating our ability to reach our greenhouse gas targets by 2050. And in developing these recommendations, it was done in collaboration with a policy advisory committee that we have, as well as utilizing strategies that come from the regional transportation plans, the sustainable community strategies, and other statewide plans, including the California Air Resources Board scoping plan. One of the recommendations is seeking sustainable long-term transportation funding mechanisms, and we've identified an action that includes implementing a statewide means-based user road charge program as a replacement for gas tax based off of the findings of the road user charge study. And we also have 6 other actions. I'm not going to go through those, but those are available in the document. One of the things I also just want to emphasize is that we do separate in the document the difference between pricing and the road user charge. We understand that those are 2 totally different things. And of course, the work that you guys are involved in is really tied to the infrastructure aspect and maintaining our infrastructure. And so we do have those discussions identified in the document as well. Just in terms of next steps, I'd mentioned, we're going to be hosting a series of webinars. So September the 25th, we're going to be having that information posted to our website shortly. You'll also be able to find all the other documents associated with the CTP 2050. Our comment period closes on the October the 22nd. And again, definitely welcome this committee to review the document. We definitely welcome your comments that you guys have. And once we close out that public review process, then we're going to be working very hard behind the scenes to review all the comments, and be able to incorporate those comments. And then by December the 31st, we have a legislative deadline to finalize the document and actually to adopt it. And there is also an implementation component to this plan. One of the things I really want to relay is that, you know, we don't want to be in the business of developing plans and then have them sit on the shelf and you know, collect dust. But we want to ensure that we're utilizing the actions that were identified in the plan and working with entities across the state in an effort to implement the plan. And so we're going to be developing our implementation plan over the next several months, and it will be identifying agencies responsible for certain actions, timelines, and when those actions will be completed, as well as performance measures that we've identified. So that's more or less my high-level overview. I'll be more than happy to dig into any details that you guys have, but I didn't want to take up too much of your time.
I hear you, Steve.
Sorry. All right, I'm on mute. It's gonna happen. It's gonna happen more than once this meeting. Thank you very much, Marlon. Appreciate that information. I know I have a copy of that on my desk actually, and I'm hearing a little bit of echo. So I don't know if people are on speakerphones or they can put themselves on mute. But before we go on to the next items, a couple things actually. First of all, I want to welcome Richard Marcantonio for joining the meeting. I see him on the screen, so appreciate that. Make sure that the minutes reflect that he was at the meeting. And again, any thoughts or questions or comments for Marlon from the group?
Yeah, Steve, if I could jump in here, Joe. Marlon, thanks for that. I've only had an opportunity to kind of glance at the draft transportation plan, but I did notice that there weren't any specific dates for reaching that goal related to I forget the exact word, the means capable, or basically a road charge. And it was helpful when you mentioned that there would be an implementation plan being developed. But can you share with us what the timeline might be for adopting that particular strategy?
You know, I don't have that at my fingertips, but I'll be more than happy to circle back around and follow up, you know, with the CTZ staff to provide that information.
Yeah. The only worrisome thing is it's a 2050 plan. So if you're trying to get it done by 2050, that's one thing. If you're trying to get it done sooner, which I assume would show up in the implementation plan, that would be good to know.
Yeah, in sort of overarching, I think it's important to point out, you know, we do develop this plan every 5 years. And so basically our implementation is really tied over a 5-year period. And so as far as where this particular item falls within that window, I can definitely provide more specifics on that. But our goal is to be able to, you know, reasonably complete all the action items within the 5-year period.
Thanks. I think I saw Richard's hand up earlier.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Marlon, for this presentation. I'm Richard Marcantonio with Public Advocates. I have a question about transit operating funding. As you know, our transit systems across the state are in a state of crisis because of the loss of revenue at the state, local, at every level. And the Federal CARES Act pumped $25 billion in emergency transit operating funding into the systems. That's going to get us a certain number of months out. But I wanted to ask you whether in this plan or in any other initiatives at Caltrans right now, the state is taking any action to, for instance, to move capital funds into emergency operations, or is that addressed in this plan or otherwise? Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely in regards to transit funding, that is a really high priority. One of the things that I'll point out is that we do have an effort that CalSTA is actually involved in, and it's called the Integrated Travel Project. And the idea is to help streamline the payment process to reduce any friction associated with people trying to utilize transit, and basically try to have more of a unified platform, so you don't have all these different payment systems, because that is sort of an issue, and I think often acts as a deterrent for people being able to utilize transit. But we do understand that the need to have more flexibility when it comes to transit capital. There are a number of funding programs that help support that. And the plan does touch on some of those aspects.
If I could just follow up, the other question, thank you, Marlon. And the other question is relating to safety on transit during the pandemic and whatever might follow. How is that being addressed in the plan or more generally at the state level? Thanks.
Yeah, so one of the things that I want to, maybe just talk a little bit about is, when we were in the process of basically releasing the draft document, basically the pandemic happened, and it actually caused us to go back and reevaluate the plan, because obviously the trajectory that we thought the state was going, was significantly altered. And so we actually do have a robust discussion in the plan that does speak to various aspects related to transit. We have seen a significant reduction in ridership, significant reduction in VMT, and so we wanted to make sure in the plan that we're recognizing that, and having a discussion on it, and we did revise our recommendations to actually focus on some of those pieces, especially related to the safety aspect, in regards to COVID. So we did want to make sure that was sort of front and center in the plan.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
And
Thanks,
if I could just
Richard,
jump in.
Thanks, Marlon. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Mitch.
Yeah, just in answer to your first question, Richard, most of the funding that the state has for transportation, and certainly near the vast majority of what comes through the Transportation Commission, is limited constitutionally to really essentially to capital improvements, and so specifically for transit, so it can't be used for operations, it can't be used for rolling stock, a number of things. There are some other programs that do have some flexibility, but those are by and large formulaic programs, or programs that are funded, for example, from the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund.
Yeah, and one of the things that I'll mention too, there's a financial element that we've identified in the plan, and it does speak to basically looking at the variety of funding sources. And to Mitch's point, which fund sources can be used for certain purposes, and so we have laid all that out, and it does serve as a pretty good inventory to look at the variety of funding across the state and what it applies to.
All right, great. Thanks for that follow-up, Mitch, and thanks, Marlon, again. Any other questions on the draft California Transportation Plan presentation? Susan.
Yeah, I just want to kind of back up Jim McGaffer's statements. about a pilot program in California, and it was stated that that could be a difficult thing to, for the state of California vehicles to do some kind of a pilot program. But it seems like, and I think we've discussed this before, but I just wanted to bring it forward. It seems like it'd be nice for Caltrans just to do even a paper study of sort of like what Joseph, the secretary, did. How many miles have they traveled and how much money have they spent on gas, and then calculate out the gas tax on that. Just to see if there's variations in the state, being as they're all over the state, we could see if there's variations, because that could tell you something about potential regional pricing. And, it just seems like it could just be almost a white paper study, just with numbers. And I have to think that Caltrans keeps track of the miles on their vehicles and the amount of money that's spent on gas. So I just want to mention that. And then with the number that Secretary Joe just put out with the $358 per vehicle per year, I did a quick calculation of what's the average amount of miles that people drive in a year. And it's about just under 15,000. And so that brings us to 2.5 cents a mile. And then in Oregon, they're charging 1.7 cents per mile. So I just think it's kind of nice to start to get to some of these numbers, because it helps us to wrap our head around what we're aiming for, what we're doing, and how we're talking about this. Anyway, so I just want to mention those thoughts.
Mr. Chair.
Hey, Susan, thank you very much. Jim, you have a comment on that?
Yeah, I just want to agree with the mayor, and I understand from the commissioner what his comments are, and he was spot on. And we came up with some numbers that back in 15 and 16 that was very similar to what you were talking about, and right on, Susan, with the cost per mile. And I guess the thing, and I know Secretary Kim made the comment how difficult it is to get a fleet set up. Well, just imagine getting 40 million registered vehicles set up. And so that's all the more reason why we need to be working on this fleet now. When we started this process in 2014, following the passage of Senate Bill 1077, California pretty much led the rest of the country in this effort. And I can remember meeting with Secretary Kim when he was working for the Department of Transportation in the Obama administration, and lots of members all the way up to the Secretary himself of Transportation. And the interest in what California was doing was extremely high, because we were ahead of the curve and we were doing a lot of things. Since then, I think that, with all due respect, and I don't take this wrong to the Caltrans staff or the CTC staff, believe me, you're operating within the confines that you're being given, but we've really slipped. And I get it, as our vice chair said at the beginning of the meeting, we did slow down during SB1, because the last thing we wanted to talk about while that was being challenged with Prop 6 was, charging people to drive on the road, God forbid. But, folks have lost sight of the fact that this is how we pay for transportation. And while the secretary made the comment that things are not as dire as they were, that shouldn't be a reason that we should slow down. And so, if anything, I've seen this TAC do as an external group of third-party representatives from throughout the state is, quite frankly, to keep the pressure on the administration and on the legislature to move forward with the inevitable. And that is, gasoline will eventually go away as the transportation, as the mechanism to move transportation, or I should say petroleum-based products. And that's going to happen at some point. We all know that. Just look at the world around us. And it's just very frustrating for me that we aren't doing more now when we could be. And what I really worry about is where California's been in a position to set the standards and to lead the rest of the country, because other states are now moving ahead of us, we may be playing second fiddle. So, we started the OBD2 port, as you all know. We've started a lot of things related to transportation. There's no reason we shouldn't be doing this. Oregon, of course, as you all know, we've learned this, started the gas tax in I think 1918, and California followed in 1920. And that's as long as it's been going. So now it's been 100 years. what are we going to do now for the next 100 years? And I would just hope that we could see things moving along a little bit faster, and these fleets at the state or autonomous or what have you would be a really good way to move as quickly as possible without the public opposition, because there's no public opposition when you tell the fleet operator, this is what we're putting in and trying it. There's no public opposition when the autonomous vehicles already have that telemetry data being uploaded in the miles traveled, like Mitch said. So again, soapbox for me. I know other members of the TAC share this same concern, but I think we need to continue to say this, and it should be an effort and recorded in our minutes that this group at some point is going to expect the state to start doing a little bit more than what's been happening over the last couple of years.
Hey, Jim, thank you for that, and thank you for your continued pushing, leadership, and cheerleading on the issue. And that is part of the role of this group, and something that we all participate in as well. Any other thoughts, questions, comments on the draft transportation plan for Marlin? Okay, I think that's it for that. Marlin, thank you very much for your information, and you know, I would echo his comments to encourage everybody on this call, or everybody who's listening in, to weigh in and jump in with your thoughts and reactions to the draft plan. So I appreciate that. So Lauren, this brings us back to you, I believe, and I think we're going to go over the disadvantaged community study. Is that right?
Yes, thank you so much. If I could get CTC staff to bring that up, thanks so much. So I do have two presentations for you today, but before I jump into those, I do want to provide just a couple of brief updates on various things related to our program. First off, I am so pleased to report that the Caltrans Road Charge program is once again fully staffed. We brought on Stephanie Ross in March as our communication analyst, so it is just a wonderful thing to have a full team again charging ahead. Secondly, I want to highlight here, you can see on the screen, we have a new logo. As we are in the process of updating our website and building what we need to do for recruitment this fall, we reviewed our current materials and felt that given a certain amount of transportation funding fatigue in the state, that a logo that centered a coin was no longer the best thing to communicate what the program was about. So our new logo draws on the shape of the little locator that you can find on Google Maps, and just is meant to remind us of all the great places in California that our transportation system connects us to. Next, we will be recruiting this fall for our Pay at the Pump demonstration, which is on track to go live January 1. And we will be reaching out to TAC members later this fall to invite you to participate if you are interested. In July, we kicked off our most recent project with Dr. Susan Shaheen at UC Berkeley. That project will be digging into more impacts with disadvantaged communities. We were able to have a really great kickoff meeting with Marty Walks and Richard Marcantonio to talk through some strategies and issues that we were seeing. And I know the research team really appreciated that opportunity and is kind of mulling on the great comments that we got. Finally, I just want to note that the Minetta Transportation Institute has, I think, really taken on giving a service to the road charge community by taking some of the work that Caltrans staff and CTC staff did earlier this year in a research scan, bringing that together and putting it online in a database on their website. This should be up later this month, I believe. And I just really appreciate the Minetta Institute for creating this resource, which I think will be so beneficial to anyone who's interested in understanding what research has been done on this issue. So huge thanks to them for that. So with that, I'm going to dive into talking about a research project that we completed earlier this year, specifically looking at communications with disadvantaged communities, trying to understand where they are in their understanding of transportation funding currently, in their understanding of road charge, and what their priorities for a road charge program might be. So next slide, please. We started off in the beginning of the year with several focus groups, 2 each in Sacramento, LA, and Fresno. And there was one Spanish-speaking group, as well as an online discussion board that went over 3 days that had participants across 14 counties in California. Next slide, please. You can see here some of the demographic breakdown of those focus groups. It was good that we were able to get kind of a nice mix of people in the different groups. Next slide, please. Informed by those focus groups and the discussions that were taking place there, we put out a survey of 1,600 Californians. It was an online survey, and each of these participants reported an annual income of under $51,000. I do note that all of this was just completed before COVID hit, so we just got under the wire on that. Next slide, please. As we analyzed the responses, I think what really jumped out to us was that much of the findings are really in line with previous conclusions on communications research about road charge. Things like, there is a general low awareness of how transportation is funded. Most people don't know what road charge is, that kind of thing. This really is useful in that it tells us that any information that we're going to use in a general education campaign will also be useful in this targeted population as well. Next slide, please. A couple of other interesting things that jumped out to us from the focus groups and the survey. When we engaged with the Spanish-speaking group, it really struck us that their attitude in general towards road maintenance and repair was much more positive. They were more appreciative of good roads, and they recognized the need for everyone to contribute to a good transportation system, which we thought was really interesting, and it was an interesting nuance and might be worth further exploration in the future. Secondly, options, the importance of options. Obviously, in the 2017 pilot, we provided multiple options on how people collected their road charge. In this survey, we also discussed different payment options, different timing for payment options. Do you want to pay annually, monthly, pay at the pump, that kind of thing? And different people wanted different things. So it really underlined to us that as we structure this program, at every point where we can provide options and flexibility for the users, that's just going to make the system much more appealing to people. Lastly, why not just raise the gas tax? We got that question a lot, despite sometimes explaining the problem with the gas tax multiple times. So it really underlined to us that people are comfortable with the familiar. I mean, we know that we have an uphill battle, but we do need to work a little bit more on explaining and getting across what the problem with the gas tax is.
Hey, Lauren, before you go to the next slide, just a quick comment on those last 2 bullets you just mentioned there. One on the options issue. I think other research has shown that options and value added things are important, and so I think that's been consistent. But at the same time, simplicity is also desired, and so I think as we in all of our minds as we go forward, balancing those 2 things is going to be important. And on your last point on why not just raise the gas tax, obviously that's the obvious short-term answer, right? And I'm kind of, which makes perfect sense in my opinion. Longer term, maybe not. And I was curious though, in the information that was provided to the participants, were they informed that the gas tax had just been increased and is now increasing regularly?
So we did, well, first we asked if they were aware that it had recently been increased, and many of them were not. So then we did give them some information regarding SB1 and things like that. It didn't necessarily, they still kept asking this question. So yeah, they're again, people are not necessarily out there studying how transportation works in California. They have their own lives and day jobs. So, we have to be able to get through that in our messaging.
Thanks, Lauren. Sorry for the interrupt.
No worries. Next slide, if I may. So one question we asked, just the top concern of all drivers, fairness continues to be the strongest argument for a road charge. Once the road charge is explained, that's really what resonates with folks. Another issue that again was raised is slight lack of understanding of what's going on there, what the state's intent is that they're concerned that the road charge is in addition to the gas tax. They're just going to be double taxed. So we need to make sure that the information we put out needs to reiterate road charge is a replacement, not an addition to. But obviously there's a lack of trust in government and some cynicism that we'll have to fight. But it just was helpful in underlining what we need to continue to try to get across. Next slide, please. So next steps from this, we will be continuing to do ongoing communications research through our current demonstration project. We'll have some more focus groups and polling, in the next year, just, so we continue to try and understand where Californians are and what they feel about road charge. The findings from this study will be informing our future educational materials and our communications, our recruitment efforts this fall, and the website updates that we're currently working on. Next slide. So with that, I just wanted to pause on this presentation and see if you have any questions about the report. The whole report should have been provided to you, so I don't know if you've had a chance to look at it, but I'm happy to take any questions on this.
Great, thanks, Lauren. Any other questions or thoughts for Lauren? I see Susan's hands up.
Yeah, I've just been thinking a bit about messaging, and I know we kind of decided to shut messaging down during SB1's passage, renewal, but I've been looking at history of roads, history of road charges, building roads. How did it come? You can go back to BC, but I think it's really interesting for people to get that. As you were saying, there's a low awareness of transportation funds. We have to really form our messaging. I think if we kind of take it away to some degree right now from California, I know we're focused on California, but we should sort of build the human story of roads, civilizations. And I can imagine this being done by someone who's really good at, computer graphics or something, just sort of a quick little, they're building things. And how are these roads paid for? And it's really interesting to look over the course of history. The conversation we're having right now has happened for thousands of years. And so I found that really fascinating. And if you even go back to early United States, when they wanted to build roads, they recognized it was a use charge that they wanted to do. So now at this point, it is embedded in gas tax and it's kind of unseen. But I can just imagine that we could raise some consciousness about how roads are paved or how roads are paid for through kind of taking it out of today's story and more going through history and really sort of tying things together for people so that they can even see the future and, looking at, do they want their road to be a good road or not, or, So I do think messaging is really important. And I kind of think this is a time for really creative marketing, just not so much about that we're marketing the road charge, committee's work or something, but just that we're marketing the awareness of transportation funds and future and history and just kind of almost like a little bit of a story. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you for that. I actually love everything you just said because, and hopefully you'll see this as we get our website updates out there later this fall. But we are kind of hitting on some of the things that you talked about. We're hitting on the fairness message. We're hitting on, transportation is changing in California and we need a funding structure that gets us to the future of transportation and what that's going to look like. And we also focus on the fairness, the equity aspect of it. We will have some stuff on there on the history of the gas tax that people can learn about. And we're also in the process of developing, hopefully for next year, some educational videos that will walk through how transportation funding works, what is a road charge, those kind of basic questions. So I absolutely hear you, and I'm excited. I feel like we're very much on the same page.
Thanks, Susan, for that, and thanks, Lauren. Yeah, I think this issue's popped up over the years that this group is a meeting, and clearly as we move forward, and it's a very challenging thing. Trust us, AAA. We've been trying to educate on this for 100 years, but we do need to raise some degree of awareness in the public's mind about the fundamentals of how roads and other transportation are paid for, and the options and paths forward. So appreciate that very much. Other thoughts or comments or questions from anybody? Okay, I am not seeing any at this point. So Lauren, I guess we can move on to the next topic, which is the other research plans going forward.
Great. So in February, we presented a 3-year plan for the program, and I'm happy to say that we are perfectly in line with that plan right now. Today, I will be sharing with you the key questions the program needs to answer. In general, as we did the research scan and looked what's been done, through the work that's been done in multiple state pilots, including ours and including active programs in Utah and Oregon, the main structure of a road charge program has really been developed and tested. So when we were looking at gaps, what we felt was the work that we need to do now is to understand how road charge works in some unique scenarios, or to dig into the specifics of implementation in California. So some of the questions that we're going to talk through are high-level policy questions, whereas others are more on the technical side, and they're in no particular order. But I'm looking forward to getting your thoughts and inputs on these. Next slide, please. So third-party account managers have mostly been settled on as an appropriate thing to administer a road charge program. The idea being to lower administrative costs and incentivize innovation. What we need to really study now to make this work in California is what state mechanism do we use to create this competitive marketplace? Is it a contracting process? Is it a certification process? A business partner process? That's one thing that we need to study to understand how we can create that market and make it actually happen in California. Next slide, please. California Consumer Privacy Act. Obviously, privacy has always been critical for road charge. And we need to understand how this new law impacts the program. I know CTC staff have also identified this as an important question, and they are looking at it currently, which is great to have their help. A related sub-question to this is, as I talked earlier about the importance of options, especially in payment timeframes, we need to make sure that we understand how that interacts with any data destruction requirements. For example, if you want to pay your road charge annually, and there's a requirement to delete data within 30 days, that's not going to give you a chance to really contest any charges. So we just need to make sure that we get down to that level of detail and understand how different structures work together. Next slide, please. How should the international border with Mexico be addressed? This map that you see here is from a report from RUC-West that was on out-of-state drivers and looking at different sections of different states and how different characteristics of different sections of the border to be considered. You can see down at the southern border of California, we have 2 different circles there. The yellow circle is more the international freight that's going through from Mexico into the US. And the blue circle is slightly different in that, San Diego area, it's more commuter traffic. So those are slightly different in their considerations. Overall, it seems like a very simple question, but it's going to be very complex in its details. As we look forward to a potential transition period to a road charge, As long as there is a gas tax in place, this issue should be covered because anyone will still be coming in will still be paying a gas tax. But at a point where we consider eliminating the gas tax, that's where it's going to start being an issue, how to capture those people coming in that may not be part of a system. The state of Washington did in their recent pilot include drivers from Canada and looked at how that worked, which was very interesting, and we continue to study what they have done. But that's really assuming an interoperable system that is basically treating Canada like another state. We can't assume necessarily that Mexico would want to also participate in a road charge, so it could end up being a very hard border. So that's an issue that we need to really think through. Next slide, please. How would a road charge program affect Native American tribes? There are about 110 federally recognized tribes in California, and we need to understand whether the tribes are interested in a road charge. And then we need to examine how the tribes could be included in a road charge system if they are interested. One of the things, we talked in February about potential grant proposals to submit to the Federal Surface Transportation System Funding Alternative Program. And the one we ended up going with, the public-private roads funding, whether GPS can have that ability to differentiate. One of the things that we hope potentially to do if we are awarded that grant is to start engaging the tribal community in this discussion. So we will see if that goes forward. We did submit that grant proposal in earlier this year, and it's currently under review by the FHWA. Next slide, please.
Could I ask a question about the Native American tribes issue?
Absolutely.
What percentage, so when we have been calculating the impacts and the costs in terms of, how much of the state's roads are in Native American land?
That is a good question, and definitely one that we need to understand to understand the impacts to the revenue projections. I don't know that off the top of my head, but I'm happy to follow up with you on that.
I'm just curious from a legal standpoint, because after the Supreme Court's decision in McGirt, which definitely seemed to emphasize some of the treaty obligations that the federal government has, and then affects the allocation of power between at least the courts of the state and the feds with respect to criminal jurisdiction. I was just wondering whether, that made me very aware in a way that I had not been for like most of my life of the importance of Native American law in a state that contains a great deal of Native American reservation land. So I don't even understand really as a lawyer, how much authority the state has with respect to any of the roads on those lands. Does the state pay for any of those roads?
Right. So the awareness of funding for tribes that I have is that the feds do cover a lot of the funding through the Bureau of Indian Affairs, I believe. I know that they are eligible to apply for certain state grants, such as the Active Transportation Program grants. One thing that they can sometimes struggle with is having the data needed to make a strong grant proposal. And so this is one area that road charge might be of interest to them, and that it might help them collect data. But certainly, California respects the sovereignty of Native American tribes. And so this is very much something where it's a conversation about how would you like to be included. There's definitely no sense of this is going to happen, but we definitely need to understand how we can work with the tribes, what benefits might be there for them in working in a road charge and things like that.
And again, because I'm like the privacy guy in this community, and very clearly state law has a different role with respect to the reservations, right? So for instance, you're going to be evaluating the current CCPA, you're probably also going to have to evaluate if the Prop 24 passes as a ballot initiative, then how that affects state privacy law. But in all those cases, those are not, as I understand it, directly, like, we don't have jurisdiction as our privacy law doesn't have jurisdiction over on the Native American tribes. That I would very much want to urge that that we not relax any of the concerns about individual privacy, about the collection of geolocation data, et cetera, that even though whatever laws are binding on us with respect to California are not necessarily binding on us with respect to the participation of folks on Indian land. Thanks.
Thank you for that comment. Obviously, it highlights that this, even though it seems a brief question, is again very complex. So it's definitely something that we need to be able to work through. Next slide, please. So obviously, we have a lot of focus on the impact of a road charge to disadvantaged communities. We've done some research on the financial impacts, but I think what we also need to be doing is looking at the access impacts, looking at every point where the user touches the system and making sure it's workable for our friends in disadvantaged communities. You know, folks have different levels of internet access. We need to look at different banking and payment types. We have 7.5% of Californians who are unbanked. How is that going to work? I'm hopeful that, you know, with this new project that we've just kicked off with UC Berkeley, that we'll be able to use that to look at some of these issues. But it's something ongoing that we want to make sure the structure is not adversely impacting those communities as well. Next slide, please. And this is one kind of continued aspect of that. What enforcement options are available through the income tax or lien process? There has been research done on enforcement, and there's some good work out there. But it all focuses on enforcement options through the DMV and vehicle registration and ultimately vehicle impoundment. And we need to ask the question, what are the consequences of impounding a vehicle on disadvantaged communities? And this could be an outsized impact. They are using the vehicle to get to work, to purchase essentials, that kind of thing. And they don't necessarily have the flexibility and resources to suddenly come up with $500,000, $2,500 to free their vehicle from impound as you keep building over the days. So what we want to take a look at is, are there other options on the income tax side that we could use for enforcement that might not be as impactful? You know, if we're looking at something like a tax lien or wage garnishing, it potentially is more incremental, and it hopefully wouldn't impact people's ability to earn a livelihood. So this is something that we want to look at. Next slide, please.
Can I ask a quick question about that?
Absolutely.
So my understanding that, I don't know if it still works the same way, that Oregon's program was essentially netting out the road charge and a gas tax an individual paid. So are you looking at that as an enforcement option and as an option to essentially capture people crossing borders?
So we're looking at netting out a road charge payment and a gas tax payment. Is that your question?
So yeah, so that's how Oregon's program works. So they estimate how much a gas tax person would pay, and then what the road charge is based on the miles they drive, and they net those out. So it seems to me that would operate both as an enforcement mechanism to ensure that somebody is paying a road charge if there's a net out process, and it would also deal with the border issues, at least to the effect that they're dealt with effectively now. I mean, if someone is living in Calexico and drives to Mexicali to get gas, once a week, we're not getting any gas tax from them anyways. So it seems like we could do some kind of netting out in that way.
Right, I see what you're saying. So definitely during any sort of transition period where we have both a road charge and a gas tax, if that's how the legislature ends up structuring it, we would need to consider balancing that out and crediting it. And so yes, that would in that transition period, that would help address those issues. Where it's going to become
I'm suggesting you consider it not as a transition, but as a strategy both to deal with enforcement and with cross-border traffic.
Okay. If we, a lot of these things will be determined by the legislature, but if at some point we do phase out the gas tax, we're going to have to be looking at people only paying a road charge. So we'll need to look at something that can follow up with them if they are not submitting those payments. But there's definitely some crossover there, as you suggest.
Could I make a comment here too?
And Lauren, I'm sorry if I could just jump in on that point also. I think that what you just said there, I think is important, that clearly the legislature ultimately will determine, what happens and how much is charged and all that. But they're going to need information, and they're going to need thoughts and recommendations and advice and guardrails along what they consider. So that's all of our role. I think I saw some other folks who wanted to jump in. Lee?
Yeah, I just wanted to call out a value that I think that's really important to put up front in enforcement, and that again is equity, right? Because, and as you started thinking about that point in terms of not making it impossible for people's livelihoods to continue. But I just want to emphasize that point, because we've seen in a lot of different areas of government enforcement of things that it is very easy for the government to start assessing people and garnishing people's money, or even seizing their cars and all sorts of things. And that most recently, in looking at like AB 64 or 644 and the toll road debacle in Southern California, where many people were many ordinary drivers were having their privacy violated, and also having being exposed to quite a few really disgusting tactics in terms of coming after people for failing to pay tolls or for mistakes or errors in actually calculating fines. And one of the things that was really striking about that process, and it shares in that with like cash bail and other kinds of processes that are extremely discriminatory, is that it's easy when we're thinking about we need to enforce in order to make sure that people comply. But that can have a lot of really inequitable effects if we're not careful about how we enforce. So all I wanted to say is that we should try to make equity and not having discriminatory enforcement practices be a really important part of the road charge, because I think that'll contribute to the sense of overall equity that's so important here. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Lee. Lauren, go ahead, or respond further if you wish, and continue on.
Right, thank you. And I will just note to your point, Steve, that you're right. The legislature is going to be highly involved in these details, and they need advice about different options. And that's really where this kind of question comes in. We've already done some stuff on enforcement options on the DMV side that we can detail to them and provide as an option. I just want to make sure that we are looking at a number of things, so if they debate these issues of privacy and equity and all how they interact, that they do have some informed advice to draw on in how they ultimately decide. Next slide, please. What is the impact of road charge on super commuters? We've done research on the financial impacts to rural communities, disadvantaged communities. But we have this growing group in California of super commuters, and we can't necessarily assume that the impact of road charge is going to be the same as it has shown on disadvantaged communities or rural drivers. Specifically because we don't know what type of vehicles they're using yet. We need to do some research on this point. As we've done research and found that road charge will likely be more helpful to disadvantaged communities and rural drivers, it's primarily because the vehicles that they are currently driving tend to be less fuel efficient. And so that's where the savings comes in. But we don't know what vehicles super commuters are driving. It could be a whole range, it could be a mix, that kind of thing. And I think that as the legislature continues to do some really important work on addressing the housing issues in our state, that this is going to be something that they will want to understand. Next slide, please. Off-road fuel usage. So obviously there are multiple things that use gas but don't drive on a public road. And again, this is another instance of, how are we handling these special cases in a road charge system? And a related technical question is there are existing processes for these types of uses to seek a refund for the gas tax through the Department of Tax and Fee Administration. And we needed to examine those processes and see how they could potentially be incorporated into a road charge or adapted appropriately to build off these existing processes. Again, with our potential public-private roads project, we are hoping to engage the agricultural community in that project. So we may be able to start to investigate some of these issues, at least in the agricultural context, through that project if it is awarded. Next slide, please. In-vehicle telematics, who owns the data? Obviously, CTC staff have also identified this as a key question. Data ownership is obviously larger than just road charge, but it will affect future possibilities. I do know that Congress is currently considering a national pilot, which might end up being a great avenue to investigate this question. Next slide, please. What are the key considerations for addressing a road charge on commercial vehicles? Commercial vehicles obviously have their own unique factors to consider that are very different from private vehicles. So we need to study what is workable for the trucking industry and also effective for the state. And again, this is one of those questions that is very simple at the high level, but we know that underneath will be a whole bunch of complex questions as well. Next slide, please. So that's the list of key things that we've identified that are gaps that we need to tackle. I am happy to take any more questions or get thoughts or inputs on what you guys think about these.
Hey, Lauren, thank you so much. I see Marty's hand up, and I'm sure there may be others as well. I'll take the chair's prerogative to ask the first question, if you don't mind, Marty, and then we can go on. I wonder, Lauren, if you could talk a little bit about two things. One is timing for when this research will be done, and there may be multiple timeframes, but talk a little bit about that. And then talk about the role of this committee in that research. How can we be a resource, a sounding board, and an input into this research that you outlined?
Right. Thank you for that question. So again, these are questions, and if we refer back to the 3-year plan that we talked about in February, we're taking these questions now, and we're in the process in the next half of this year of putting together a research plan to address how we're going to do that. So that will be done by the end of the year, and we will be presenting that research plan to you at the next meeting in February. So I'm kind of going to punt until then to answer your questions more specifically, but we will definitely, as we are pulling together that plan, be thinking about how the TAC can be involved, and we can draw on all of your great expertise and experience.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and please do. I mean, please include the TAC in every step of the way as much as possible, and not that everyone can dedicate all sorts of time to it, But I think whether it's informal meetings or having the TAC members participate in other groups or focus groups or other opportunities to input, I think you've got a great resource here, as I think you know. So I highly encourage that. Marty, you had a question.
Yes. Lauren mentioned that Richard Marcantonio and I had talked with Lauren and the team at Berkeley that is doing the second study on the impact of the road charge on the disadvantaged. And we made some fairly extensive suggestions to change the research design. And they stated there would be a follow-up with us. Lauren also showed a slide that listed some questions that remain unanswered by the focus group study, questions about access and unbanked people and so on. And I can report that the Berkeley study design did not address those questions that were listed on that slide. So the question I'm asking is, can we do follow-up with Berkeley people since they're already under contract? And can we get an update on the redirection of their study that might follow upon the very extensive suggestions that Richard and I made to them?
Right. Thank you, Marty. And again, we so appreciate, Susan could not stop talking about how great it was to have your guys' input into the study, especially as we're kicking off. Certainly, especially when it comes to the challenge that we are all living in. The scope of this project was completed in January, in the time before, right? And this project is aiming to get some input from some folks that are already hard to contact. And COVID has made that even more challenging. So some of your comments on that point were very well heard, and the team, we've already had one follow-up meeting trying to discuss, okay, how are we gonna, get to these folks in this time where it's hard to talk to people. So that is one aspect, and as we're noodling over thinking outside the box of how to deal with that, we'll of course keep you updated. In terms of some of the other things, one great thing about Dr. Shaheen's research is, she has developed this STEPS matrix. And I'm not going to go through the acronym because I won't get it correct, but it's so important for her to be thinking about things through the physical interaction, the financial interaction, those kind of things, which I've so appreciated about what she brings to this project. Certainly not all of the aspects of that question will be addressed through this project. We're trying to organize our different resources and see what we can draw on here and there, and that's part of our work this fall as we put together the research plan. So we will, of course, keep you updated, and Susan is very excited about having you involved specifically, so that will be ongoing.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. I couldn't help but think of you, Lee, when I saw that slide up there about who owns the car data. Anyway, long story there. Well, over many drinks when we're back in person, Lee and I can tell you some stories. Anyway, Mitch, I think you raised a hand.
Yeah, so I have a question. If one assumed that there would need to be some sort of regulatory process to implement a road charge, couldn't many of these questions, which we think we might know the answers based on existing research, or have some ideas about how we might work out, be implemented after authorizing legislation were enacted?
Well, as we think about legislation that will need to move forward, that's one thing that we need to examine of what actually needs to be changed in statute, and what can be worked out in implementation. That will definitely need to be part of our work moving forward. But there's a lot that would need to be changed in statute, and as the Secretary mentioned, we need to make sure that we get that right. It will be a complex discussion in the legislature. SB 1 was not easy. I was very much involved in that, and it It took a lot, and it was close. And as we all know, we had a senator recalled over that vote. We could face just such a complex situation with a move to road charge. So we do want to make sure that we have everything lined up as best as possible for the legislature to consider.
Yeah, I guess in my mind, it's different. It's different to say, to write a legislation that says, off-highway vehicles and agricultural vehicles that currently don't have to pay the gas tax shouldn't be subject to the road charge. Boom, that's a couple of sentences. Figuring out how to implement that is the next step, which, obviously, there take more time and perhaps a iterative process. As some of you may know, there was a revision in the weight-free structure more than a decade ago. The legislature put in place a reporting back, and the fee structure got adopted. I guess I don't want perfection to become an obstacle, because we're not going to always know everything. We're not going to have all the answers. There are, as with everything, going to be some unintended consequences. And just as you mentioned with SB1, there was legislation following SB1 to make adjustments to make some programs more workable. So I hope we don't spend all our time trying to get answers that really aren't going to get us any closer to a road charge.
Definitely not the intent at all.
And thanks, Mitch. I appreciate that. And again, I think we have to have a good balance here of efficiently and effectively moving forward. And I think your comment about the perfect not being the enemy of the good is a good point. But I think also part of this is technical. Part of it is political in the sense of action by the legislature. And part of it, again, is public acceptance, which impacts the others. And so I think the more information, the better. But I hear your words very much. Other thoughts from, I think I see Lee's hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on the legislative aspect of it, because I'm not particularly comforted by the ability of this current legislature, certainly while we're under the effects of the pandemic, being able to do anything complicated in the legislature that actually involves details. What we have seen this year is slop, right? The legislature is just slopping through everything. And there's a great deal of fighting between the legislature and the governor, because the Governor Newsom is trying to do things with a lot of executive orders or with signing contracts to do one thing or another. And it's turned into quite a transparency and accountability battle between the legislature and the governor. And I foresee that we're expecting a special, probably an urgency session coming in, emergency session coming in later this month. That could last through November. Then we're going to look at serious budget craziness beginning in January. The tendency of the legislature in times like this is to punt hard decisions that would otherwise might be worked out in a bill because it's too hard to negotiate and the deadlines are crazy. And so they go forward and give agencies or other officials a lot of discretion, because they'll write a general rule, but they're not capable of writing the detailed rule. So one of my concerns is simply that I think that's part of what Mitch was saying, is we have to be vigilant and involved in all of the processes that because the legislative side is going to delegate a lot of actual value choices and trade-off making down lower, and that may in turn give officials who are implementing the process a lot more discretion. And so we may lose sight of the facts or of granularity in what choices are being made as it goes through that process. And I think that that's an especially significant, that's always an issue, but it's an especially bad issue right now in the current pandemic situation. So I just worry about that stuff, because I have a feeling that I'll see vague language and I won't be able to sort of know what it turns into down the road. My concern.
Okay. I think next up I saw Eric and Richard had comments. So Eric.
Yeah, Lauren, you knew I was going to ask some questions. I know it might be a little too premature, but do you have a sense or an idea of what type of information you'll be looking for or looking to do a deep dive on regarding the commercial trucking portion of it? Also, a lot of these items that the proposals that you referenced are long-standing packaged in with the commercial trucking industry's concerns relative to a road charge program, third-party administrative costs, privacy concerns, cross-border issues, enforcement of, folks that, making sure that they pay their fair share. So, it'd be interesting to see obtaining the information on that. And then finally, if there's any information that you have that you can share with me that then I can share with our membership, similar to what we did previously, I'd really appreciate that.
So, I think there's definitely still a lot that we at Caltrans need to learn about the trucking industry and the issues that they face, details about IFTA, makeup of big fleets versus individual owners, all these different implications. And I think one of the things we hope to start off with is simply having a conversation with the trucking industry and learning and understanding all those concerns that you listed. As I said, we need to study what is workable for the trucking industry. And obviously there's many state goals that the state is trying to achieve, but I do strongly believe that having an open conversation is a great way to get something pulled together that works, that can accomplish everyone's goals. So that is certainly my goal. I don't have too many specifics at this time. And in terms of information that you're looking for to provide to your members, can you be a bit more specific on that?
Well, it's previously when we did the pilot for commercial industry, we worked, I don't want to say extensively, but we worked with E-Road and others, kind of connecting participants of the pilot and sharing information. And I'd be willing to help assist on having those discussions with you and whoever else with, trucking companies. I just need to get a little bit more information before I feel comfortable doing the connection.
Right. So I appreciate that. And we will definitely be taking you up on that. I think in terms of details, we're working on that again as part of our research plan this fall. So it's going to be a little bit more time before I can have more detail to you. But I definitely intend on doing that. I know that Lori Pepper at CalSTA is also very interested in being involved in having these conversations with the trucking industry and understanding what your priorities are.
Yeah, and also one final thing, we've had discussions before where there, is there a possibility of kind of a hybrid model where if it works for some, they can utilize it. If it doesn't work for others, then they can stick with the current structure. There's the mandate out there that everybody's been talking about, but that's only a 15% on manufactured electric vehicles within the commercial industry. So it's not a huge portion that's going to be out there by 2035. And the gains as far as mileage increases within the trucking industry right now, you're really not seeing a huge gain from the newer trucks out there. So that's always something that, you might want to consider also is kind of a opt-in, opt-out type of program relative to VMT, and maybe there's a hybrid model out there that we could explore looking at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. That's a good point. And certainly very useful to know. And if there's any information that you feel would be helpful in us understanding some of the issues facing the industry, please do feel free to send that my way.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Lauren, for those assurances, and thank you always, Eric, for your involvement and participation. So crucial, and your leadership here is a model for the country. So thank you very much for that, Richard.
Thank you, Steve. Yeah, I wanted to second Marty's comments. And just mention a couple of points that we did discuss with the researchers on the disadvantaged community study. And a big point for me was that we understand this study was contracted before COVID hit, and that may in fact constrain a lot of what can be done at this point, and that's understandable. But to the extent that a study comes out, it needs to front and center be identifying its limitations, because I'm very concerned that whatever comes out of this study in a post-COVID world is not going to be applicable. It's just going to be dead wrong in some respects. Be seen as some data points, but not as the final equity analysis of the road charge. The other thing that I raised in that call, and that we as a committee have talked about a number of times, particularly in our under the new legislation that we're operating under now, so we're now talking about revenues and expenditures, right? We're talking about and equity has to be considered in connection with the whole ball of wax, not just on the revenue side. So, and that's particularly important in light of, for instance, questions that come up about, well, when we transition from the current gas tax structure to a road charge, are we going to be able to operate in a different constitutional regime than the one that was referred to earlier in terms of limitations that allow money only to be used for transit capital purposes, et cetera. So I just wanted to bring those 2 points up. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Richard. Appreciate that. Any other last comments or questions for Lauren? Joe. I think you got to unmute.
Yeah, I have to find the button. It took a while. I guess my question has to do with something I haven't seen in the research or the recommendations, and I maybe alluded to but not addressed directly, and that would be what, if any, impact there would be from shifting from a gas tax to a road charge on whether people are actually going to buy less efficient vehicles or worry less about mileage of vehicles. I'm not sure there's going to be an impact on that, but there's a possibility of it, and I think it's something we need to consider because there are a lot of costs associated with inefficient gasoline vehicles. And certainly we don't want to interrupt the trend of getting to higher efficiency. And I kind of wonder, I guess the other side of that question is how much of the fact that we're driving so much more efficient vehicles is related to the fact that we're paying a gas tax now. I don't know, but those are sort of, empirical questions that I think might be interesting to have some data to consider in terms of what we might expect when a road charge was adopted.
Yeah, Joe, I'll respond briefly, and maybe others can jump in. But this is an issue that existed right at the beginning of this process, and concerns expressed about it, and some debate about possible impacts. So it's definitely been something on our minds. throughout, and something we'll continue to look at as well. I don't know if Lauren or Hannah or Mitch wanted to comment.
Studied the issue and have any findings or data or information on what kind of impacts there may be?
So I do see that Alan Jen is in attendance at our meeting here. So I'm going to call him out because I know that he has done some work in this area. Obviously, the state has many important goals, many important policy goals, and one of them moving towards more a fuel efficient fleet is obviously a large priority. And so there has consistently been concern as to whether a road charge would be a disincentive to that uptake. And I have seen some work coming from Alan that looks at, most likely the largest factors in people's decisions to purchase the vehicles are the federal and state purchase incentives, also access to HOV lanes. So the ongoing cost, which is much smaller, is not necessarily a large part in the equation in the decision, which is encouraging for us because it does seem to indicate that there shouldn't be much of a disincentivizing effect. But I can definitely send you Alan's paper for further information if that would be helpful.
All right, thanks, Lauren, very much. Pam, did you have a comment or question? I wasn't sure.
Not right now. Not right now.
Okay, no problem. I thought I saw your hand up. Anybody else? Last chance for Lauren.
Vice Chair Finnegan, we do have Alan Jen on the line. Alan, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Oh, yes.
Great,
hi.
thank you. Go ahead, Alan.
Yeah, this is Alan Jen speaking. So regarding the comment from before, the closest examination that we've done is to look at how registration fees might affect electric vehicle sales specifically. We haven't looked at the effect on high efficiency versus low efficiency vehicles. But essentially, the way that we conducted our study was to look at sales data in different states as registration fees for electric vehicles were implemented, and then we can see if there's sort of a change in how the sales were going moving forward. And essentially, what we found was that there was an effect, but it tends to be pretty short term. And so we observe a sort of slight decrease pretty consistently across most of the states as the registration fees were announced. But that after between 3 to 6 months, that dip would recover pretty rapidly. And so with regards to the effect of a RUC, we don't have empirical data because those programs don't really exist on a broad scale. But I would expect that because they're less specific towards these vehicles, that you would either see kind of a similar effect with registration fees or smaller. But again, that's kind of hypothesizing that the empirical stuff that we see from registration fees is a small effect, but short term.
Thank you, Alan. I was hoping that you would jump in and get in the details there that I didn't have. Appreciate it.
Thanks very much. Appreciate that. Okay, any last comments, questions for Lauren? Okay, I think that's it, Lauren. Lauren, thank you very much. And I know you know this, but I can't help but say it anyway. Use this as a resource for all of this stuff going forward. Appreciate that very much. So I think that brings us, sure, thank you, Lauren. I think that brings us to agenda item number 8, which is on our sort of a tentative schedule for some meetings next year. And Hannah or Michael, do you want to touch on that?
Yes, I can touch on that and bring up this item. This item's to establish a future schedule for TAC meetings. It's an action item. The proposed future schedule includes first, the cancellation of the Friday, November 6th, 2020 meeting, which was scheduled to be in Sacramento. It also includes the proposed 2021 meeting dates, and those are Friday, February 5th, 2021, Friday, May 21st, 2021, and Friday, September 10th, 2021. Due to the pandemic, we're assuming at this point that all these meetings will be conducted online. Staff recommends that the TAC cancel the November 6th meeting and approve those the 2021 road charge TAC meeting dates.
Thanks, Michael. So I think this is up for an action item. So maybe if I could have a motion and a second.
I'll move to approve the 2021 meeting dates.
All right. Thank you, Susan.
I'll second.
All right. Thanks, Eric, for the second. And I guess we have to do the roll call. So go ahead.
Thank you. Lisa Bartlett.
Yes.
Senator Bell. Terry Benzel. Assemblymember Chu. Vice Chair Finnegan.
Yes.
Lauren Kay.
Yes.
Jim Medaffer.
Yes.
Richard Marcantonio.
Yeah.
Thank you. Pam O'Connor.
Yes.
Susan Ornelas.
Yes.
Robert Poitras.
Yes.
Eric Sauer.
Yes.
Lee Tien.
Yes.
Professor Wax.
Yes.
Chair Liu.
Yes.
Mr. Vice Chair, the motion is approved.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate that. That brings us to item 9, which is a review of action items. Hannah, do you want to walk us through that?
Okay. Here's what I heard. So there was a question about if there was a more specific timeline related to road charge in the transportation plan. So we'll get back to you on that. How many state roads are located on Native American lands? We'll follow up on that. How is the UC Berkeley study being updated based on the input from Richard Marcantonio and Professor Wax? We'll get back to you on that. And Lauren was going to send Alan Jen's paper to the TAC about the impact of the of the $100 fee on electric vehicles. And that is everything that I had. Did I miss anything? Michael or anyone, feel free to. Okay, so I think that's everything then.
Okay, thank you very much, Hannah. Appreciate that. And I think that brings us to item number 10, which is public comment. I have not been seeing any notes coming across, but I want to open it up for anyone who's on this meeting. If there are any comments or questions from the public that want to be made, if you can make sure that you alert us through chat or other means, this is your time.
Vice Chair Finnegan, we do not have any public comment or question at this time.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And I think that brings us to the final item, which is adjournment. But before I do so, any last thoughts, any last questions, any last concerns?
I have one thought, because I'm sitting here and listening to us talk about road charge, and I feel like my initial feeling is I don't like it. And so it's we've kind of put a negative spin on ourselves immediately, you know. I'm almost likening it in my head to defund the police. You know, it's like that's the wrong way to term what we're trying to achieve in that situation. So I don't know, I've just been playing with a little bit in my head, and I just want to put it out there for people to think about, because I started playing with transportation equity, and that all sounds too much. So then I thought, how about just transportation? Like if Caltran was doing a just transportation program, I feel like I'm interested. You know, it sort of spins it slightly differently. So I just wanted to put that out there for the back of our minds to play with, get out your thesaurus and play with words and find ways, because it's a huge difference in marketing if you've got the right way to say it, or if you're saying it and immediately people have a negative spin in their head. So
I think you're right on that point, and I think I think this is a topic that Jim has covered many times over the years as well. And again, I don't like things to be pushed down people's throats as just a sales job, but at the same time, we have a branding issue and an education issue, and I think that as we continue to move forward, as the state does, and ultimately the legislature, we do need to be very cognizant of that. So I appreciate that comment, Susan, very much.
Well, Steve, I'd be happy to change the name to the Gas Tax Elimination Technical Advisory Committee.
See, that's why Joe is going to be our new chair. You see, he's got brilliant ideas. It makes me think of LA Metro's congestion pricing study and effort, which has been rebranded as I think it's the Congestion Relief Project. Who could be against that? So anyway, we'll continue to work on that and think about that. But we've got to be honest too. Okay. And any other last thoughts or comments?
It's great to see everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all for participating today and in the past. Thank you very much. Thanks for CTC staff, Caltrans staff, CalSTA. Really great effort. Appreciate it. And we will keep pushing this thing forward in an effective way. So thank you very much.
Bye all. Thanks.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, everyone, for participating today. We're going to close the meeting.
Thank you.